Hi, good morning.
Hi, Martin. How are you?
I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm good. I'm good. We'll begin start at just a minute or so.
Okay.
Just gonna allow some folks to join.
Hi.
Hello. Good to see you guys again.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hi.
And Marty, you said good morning, so I'm guessing you're on the West Coast.
I'm on the West Coast, yes. Yeah. Even though there's not much to do, still here.
I'm looking forward to talking about that. I mean,
Oh
obviously,
yeah.
we're going to talk about pitches, but it'd
Yeah.
be good to hear your perspective on how you're navigating everything with the strike right now.
Yeah. It's I'm at the point of pessimism.
Oh no.
I started the year with optimism that this would be not this insane, but here we are.
Yeah, this year has been pretty pessimistic, I think.
Yeah. And then it's just like learning kind of, you know, the way that's being approached is very different than in years past. That like is not just studio presidents, right? It's like these CEOs of big conglomerates that have, their financial stake in their understanding of the sector is very different. Um, and even with Bob Iger, someone who's been in the entertainment business, like he has a very different um his shareholders, private equity owners that like, kind of have larger shares and can call the shots in a much bigger way. So
It start for me, I feel like I start to only find optimism in thinking like what will emerge kind of outside the industry at this point
right,
to
right.
like be able to go forward. And then obviously maybe the industry adapts and takes that in, but
Yeah.
it feels like that's the point we're at right now, where it feels like with what you're saying, with like shareholder interests being the most important thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, I don't know. I mean, like it's a lot of it has to deal with government regulations and if they look at this and say this is, that vertical integration, it wasn't allowed for a reason. And we're seeing kind of the product of that, the consequence of vertical integration.
I mean, I'm sure we'll have time to talk a little bit more about the strike and everything, but I mean, just to be respectful of your time, Martin, if you want
Yeah.
to give a brief overview of your career and what you've been up to, I guess, the past few weeks, given everything.
Yeah. So, I'm originally from Texas. I went to school in New York, and I went to law school in Alabama, where I thought I would do entertainment law. I came out here my first summer of law school and interned at UTA, and really just like fell in love with what was happening. I've always thought that I would work at the kind of the crossroads between business and art, not having any talent myself. But yeah, so when I graduated, it was 2009 and the economy was not great and people weren't really hiring a lot of lawyers. So it's kismet, if you will. And so I moved out here, didn't take the bar, started in the mailroom, like everyone does here, and worked my way up to coordinator at UTA and became a manager for 2 years, went over the paradigm until COVID happened, and then kind of half a paradigm left to create a new lit department at A3, which is formerly Abrams. That's where I am right now. Um, you know, right now what I'm doing is I kind of working a little bit with foreign IP. It's still kind of difficult because studios aren't really optioning anything right now in terms of IP, but using that to kind of leverage a possibility of any co-productions. It's a little bit harder because like not a lot of writers are thinking about international marketplaces. I do have a script that I'm trying to go out with, which is a K-pop thriller set in South Korea. So that's kind of my way in right now with my clients. I tell them to write, because execs are telling us that post-strike, in terms of development, it's going to be a spec market. And so it's really having your spec and your pitch prepared for when that moment happens.
Got it. So that's a perfect segue into, packaging your project and preparing your pitch.
Yeah. So before you guys have any questions, I think for me, and this is what I tell all my clients in terms of creating a pitch, what I've seen so far in my career being an elder millennial is you see these veteran writers who have, worked their way up, and during the kind of broadcast heyday, right, where, networks were buying 40, 50 scripts, and everyone was making a living writing scripts for $200,000 a year. Some people selling multiple scripts and just like calling it a day, right? And what I've learned is these veteran writers never really learn how to pitch, and their ideas were just bought because of their relationship with the studio and the network. That has gone away. There are a few people that have that relationship. Those are the top of the top, and they probably have overall deals. But in terms of pitching, you want to avoid a turn by turn. This is where, they're like, explain the pilot to us. And the writer goes, so it starts off like this, and then it goes to this, and then this happened, and then this happens, and then this happens. And then in the first act, this happens, and then this happens. And so that is my biggest kind of note. And I've spoken to executives about this, and it becomes even more, it's become more useless in the age of Zoom. I don't think executives are ever going to go back to the age of sitting in a room with someone. And so we're on Zoom right now. Everyone's kind of attention span is like this small, right? So if you're telling a story that's turn by turn, everyone just glazes over. Sorry about that. So what I tell my clients to do, and this is, I've asked execs about this, and they kind of are on the same page, is that like your pitch should be less than 15 minutes. Anything longer, you're doing too much. And so keep it to 15 minutes. Very important to start off with, especially as a young writer, as to why you're the person to tell this story, and create some authenticity around it, right? Because what you're trying to sell is, I should take a chance on you because I'm the only person that can tell this story in an authentic way, and that these emotional beats in this story comes from my experience, right? This is the question of AI not having childhood trauma. So you have to beat AI, essentially, right? So that human element of why this story resonates with you, why you're the person to write it. And it may not be like the concept itself may not be, and there may not be like a direct connection, but create characters, right, that live in that world that you may have authenticity and connection with. I think that's how you go around that. Obviously, like none of us live in 15 minutes from now sci-fi world, so we don't have that experience, but the experience is the character themselves and how they would navigate this based on your experience and your voice, right? So I would start with that structurally, and then kind of give a broad, like, this is the story that I'm trying to tell, like a log line, right? And go in with character. I think character is the most important part of a pitch. Buyers want to know who the characters are and what their journey is. And sometimes the character section becomes kind of the meat of your pitch, because projects now are about characters. You can figure out the narrative, right? The narrative is easy once you have the character. And I think that is sometimes what veteran writers, is that they lead with plot and the characters are created through the plot. Whereas you want to create the characters and weave the character's story into a plot. And then after that, you kind of pitch your pilot. Again, this is where a lot of people go wrong, and they spend 10 minutes pitching their pilot. No one wants to orally hear your pilot turn by turn in a 10-minute span. If you can keep it to like 3 paragraphs, beginning, middle, end, and then explain why, and then move on to what you want to explore in the first season, and then a little bit less in the subsequent seasons, and just kind of overall like where you want the series to end, because you should see an ending, as we move from broadcast like procedurals, which a lot of younger writers don't do, and I think a lot of broadcasters aren't looking for that in general, from younger writers. They want, we live in a world where shows aren't going to run multiple seasons. I spoke to an exec a few days ago for lunch, and he said, the reality is the longer the show runs, the more expensive it gets, right? Because you have writer raises, you have actor raises, you have everyone gets raises in subsequent seasons. And so there's a point where there's a tipping point, right? And if your project is set up at an outside studio, there becomes a negotiation. He was talking about the Connors and how, and it's going into the 6th season, they had to negotiate the budget because ABC wasn't going to pay more. So essentially what happened was ABC was going to pay the same amount, but the order had to be cut to avoid it being canceled altogether, because the project doesn't belong to ABC. There's an outside studio to it. And then you kind of wrap it up, kind of give it like this like overall shine to it. Now, a lot of people that I've met kind of outside of my clients create Bibles and all these things. I would say refrain from creating Bibles. It's a lot of work. It's work that you should already have in your head, right? As you kind of created this story, and kind of what you only need is your pitch in paper form. And I say that you don't need the visuals unless you do a presentation with visuals. And execs have said, we do love visuals. Like if you have a character, you can pull a pic of some actor that might, be the prototype for that interests them. It's something to kind of break the monotony of just talking, right? But it's not necessary if your pitch is tight, right? You just don't, their desire for it, it feels laggy. And this exec was very nice. He goes, I try very hard if someone pitches a turn by turn to kind of like listen and see like if there's actually something there. Not most execs aren't going to do that. Most execs, it's like you want to create a trailer for them, essentially, right? So in terms of written materials, I would say don't do anything beyond the pitch itself, because if they ask for materials, it's so that they have it in front of them when they are in a meeting and they're going to pitch it up. They don't need a whole, this is where it's going to go. It's like they want to be able to see the paper, distill what it is, and pitch it effectively to their boss. Everyone has buying power, essentially, but no one has buying power because everyone is so afraid of their own shadow now, that it's very much more of a business of consensus. It's always been a business of consensus, but I find that execs are less likely to buy things in the room now, and they all say they have buying power, but it takes them going back to their staff meeting and then making the pitch themselves and getting a temperature from the group.
Nice. Thank you so much for sharing that. There's, folks, if you have any questions, feel free to come off mic at this point. You know, it's just a small group. So
yeah, I told this joke in the last session too, that have you heard this joke before, Martin? It's two executives walk out of a movie. One turns to the other one and says, "What did you think of the movie?" And he says, "I don't know. I haven't talked to anyone else yet."
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's true a lot of the times. And you know, you hope to, when you pitch an exec, that like you captured their imagination and then they're there to fight for you. And that's why you're right. Usually most pitches isn't just one exec. They'll pull someone in. If like they can't pull someone that's above them, they'll pull like a coordinator in, just to like have the security blanket of like, I'm not crazy, right? This is bad or this is good. And so I mean, there's some truth to that. Because they see that happen all the time, where you have like an SVP and they're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna have this person join, and this person is a coordinator, and you're like, okay, sure, fine. And the coordinator doesn't say anything because they relinquish the control to SVP or VP, but there's a security blanket, someone to kind of like say, you are right, this is good and this is sellable and all that. So, but you know, it's in the guise of mentoring, I suppose.
Kind of going off of that, I have I guess maybe kind of a crazy question. I was kind of advised against doing this with the last speaker, but without going into details, I have like a series idea that is very sort of in a way, it's like an anti-pitch. It's kind of, it sounds crazy, but I've shot like a proof of concept and kind of just continuing to shoot more, because like the concept itself is small enough that it's possible to self-produce. Just because basically I've kind of figured like, I can't pitch this just with words alone. I need to kind of show that it works.
Right.
Do you think that, you know, in a pitch, is that something that people will be, you know, turned off by, or is that an interesting, you know, to be able to show them like, look,
yeah.
I think
Is this for features or television?
This is for television or streaming.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's a tool, right? It's not going to be you know, you're not going to live and die on that, unless it's just a really bad clip, right? So like, is it worth using something that's a visual that doesn't really add anything to it, right? But having that doesn't hurt, I don't think. Now, I think if the last speaker is a representative, would say, don't spend your money doing that, right? Because the upside is minimal. Because it's so difficult to even get anything made, and it just has to be like the most amazing video that you've ever created that is going to really capture someone's imagination. Otherwise, it's money and time and resources spent that may not bear any fruit, right? Even the best pitches, like there are good pitches that go out that never get sold, right? It has nothing to do with the pitch itself. It sometimes has to do with concepts and what the marketplace is looking for and what people are willing to bet on. So as a kind of overall rule, I would say don't spend your money and your time, your resources. But if it's something that you think is additive and brings value to the pitch itself, you know, only you and your rep can really decide that. But as a rule, don't spend money to make money in TV. And I think that's kind of like a WGA kind of thing as well. It's like, you don't spend money to make money. It shouldn't be, the onus should not be on you.
Yeah, no, I guess I'm coming at this from kind of more from the indie sort of feature shorts world, and as a writer director. So kind of like going out and just making something is really the only thing I know how to do.
Yeah.
And then I understand going into television, it's like the rules are totally different. But at the same time, it feels like television or streaming is constantly reinventing itself. So I'm just like,
they're reinventing themselves, but in terms of pitching, it's still the same, right? It can be used as IP, right? That's the thing that, you know, producers and studio execs are looking for. If it's a short that you created and executed and it's a great concept and it looks good, you know, they're not going to say no to that. But it then becomes, as a rep, I would take it out as a piece of IP, right? So you send out that short first, garner interest, and then you go in with the pitch.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, yeah, I mean, kind of to show that exposing myself is even crazier. My plan right now is to actually just self-produce an entire season and maybe put it out on like a more kind of underground streamer, like maybe talk to Movie or No Budge or something like that, and see what kind of interest is there, and then have that season as like basically an IP for if I
if that's what you want to do, and kind of do kind of the indie TV thing and put it on a platform as a piece of IP, do it. But again, is it going to yield better results? And if you're going to have the calculus of you know, ROI, you know, it's not going to increase it. It's not going to decrease it. It's just
it will just be there. Yeah,
it's just like, I think it sits on the same kind of level as everything that goes out. Because it's if it's the concept that's not right for the marketplace, and then you'll not get any traction from it. But you know, there's this example. My one of my first clients that I represented, I signed them with a drama sample, got some traction, didn't really get them staff, and then they sent over this comedy short. It was horrible. It was just poorly executed. You know, I mean, shorts are hard. You know, you have limited funds. You have your friend is a director who shouldn't probably be a director, and it just didn't come up well. And so we asked for the script, and the script was great. And then the script got them all the jobs. And so sometimes, you know, I don't know how much money they spent on it, because they did it before we represented them, but that's why I'm hesitant about it, because unless this is like something that's really well executed, it can fall on the wayside.
Yeah, no, of course it has to be, the standard has to be as high. And
you know, I know that on the indie side, Saw is an example, right? It's like they made this short and it was amazing. It captured someone's imagination, and then, you know, and now it has a life of its own. But for every that, there are hundreds of thousands of shorts that don't get that treatment.
I guess, I mean, I have a lot of opinions about shorts, or just like the state of shorts and how difficult they are, because especially if you want to do sort of something that's more narrative or shows the narrative side, shorts, you know, seem to just, it's a kind of a one-trick thing, just to appeal to an audience in a shorts program. It feels like it's impossible to, you know, I mean, there are, you know, the 15-minute narrative shorts, and they feel very futile in one way, maybe, except for to show that you can direct you know, a narrative scene.
And I think shorts are valuable if you want to be a director. more than anything. That's where I have like 2 directors on my roster. It's not really a world that I really understand that much. Because for me, you see a good director and you know it, and then you see a bad director and you see all the mistakes. But it's in between that, like I always go, oh, this looks good, and send it to the head of the directing part of our lit group, and she's like, yeah, no, I can't do anything with this. And so but it is a good good thing to have if directing is kind of your what you want to do, your goal.
How much would you discourage someone from trying to become like, the writer director? Or would you discourage that?
I don't
It feels like it's like I guess I get like a lot of, kind of like, that's a tough road.
It is a tough road, definitely on the TV side. And it's a tough road mostly because, as a young writer director, it's about getting that indie, right? Like financing that indie fundraiser. It's like, I feel like that's the hard part. I'm going to tell you a secret. When I was at UTA, they put me in film financing. And I did it for 3 months. 3 months. I hated every second of it. And the reason why is because, and I told the head of the department, I said, I hate begging for money. That's not a job that I want. And she goes, well, all agents beg for money. And I said, no, agents negotiate for more money. Film financing begs for money. And it's like, and it's a very interesting job that just doesn't appeal to me, right? It's a job where you hobnob with rich people and kind of shady people, and like it's a very Wild West world. And for me, TV has a nice structure to it. But for some people, that's a very exciting place to be, right? Because you can find someone to pay you to make something. And to me, that is a harder world. To other people, that's not. To other people, that is like what they want to do, and that's their dream. And I think that, like, being a writer director, it's mostly moving through that arena until you pop or have that piece of that feature that just makes you a name. And here's the thing: being anything in this business is not easy. If it were easy, everyone would be here doing it. And and I also tell people, and this is when I do the finding a rep thing, is like, even managers and agents we go through the gauntlet, right? We work in the mail room, we become assistants, and like we deal with crazy people, and one day hopefully someone says you can be an agent or you can be a manager, right? So like we all go through that same process of being put through the ringer and being told, no, you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, you don't fit what we need, that kind of stuff. So I think representatives are being more human now than they used to be. I think a lot of agents used to look at themselves as like gods and kind of the guard of the gates. But I think younger agents look at it as like, we get it. We get, like, this is a very hard road, and we are there with you, and we're there to kind of guide you through it at the best that we can. And I think that is kind of like something to remember, is that like having an agent isn't like everything. Like, not everything is just going to open up and you're just going to get $1 million and it'll be easy. Like, we still have clients that struggle, and it sounds like what you're doing it is the right thing, is they constantly creating. And I think the reality is the clients that do the best are the ones that are constantly creating and understanding that, like, okay, like, this didn't work, I need to move on, instead of being so stubborn. And then thing too is like, you can come back around to it. right? Maybe it's not right for the marketplace now. That's the Breaking Bad story. It wasn't right for the marketplace when he wrote it. And then it became a cultural phenomenon, right? Years later when he brought it out. So, you know, just because your project isn't something that people want right now doesn't mean that people don't want it later. And there are a lot of projects that my clients have. I'm like, let's shelve this. We did our rounds. It didn't work, but there is something to this. And I, as an agent, believe that in this project, it's just not right now. Like it may be a later date, it may be never, but the talent is there, and that's kind of, you know, and that voice and all that is there. So like I will champion it, and when it's time to champion it again, I will do it.
Yeah, that makes sense to kind of, yeah, like cycle through. I mean, I feel like I always am doing that, like an idea, and then wait, you know, run with it till I get bored, and then a few years later it's like, oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, maybe, you know, revisit it. But you know, like the best clients I have will have like 5 to 6 pitches in a year, and they will go to every open WA open writing assignment that is available, and people want to meet with them, and they work on it, and it's work. And there are writers out there who say, oh, I'm not supposed to do this free work. I'm like, I say, you're pitching. That's what you're supposed to be doing. Like, I don't know what else to tell you, right? Like, you got to sell your product, and yeah, they at least get one set up a network every year, so you get a paid script. So that's for them, those have been the odds.
Where do you see, like, you know, once the strike is over, assuming the strike ends, where do you see kind of you know, like emerging writers, you know, not established, right, you know, but emerging, you know, like what would be your prediction for like the kind of projects that will be available to them from streamers?
In terms of staffing, or in terms of, you know, what they're going to be looking for?
Pitching, I guess, pitching.
Yeah, in terms of what they're going to be looking for, I think the idea is they want to be broadcast plus, right? So I think the best analogy came from Netflix. We want to be a gourmet burger, right? A burger is something everyone understands, but we want to add something to it to make it different, right? So that's kind of I would say, and this is more in the thriller space, is like the Night Agent, or, you know, Citadel for less money, but like that kind of like, oh, I understand this procedural, but let's make it more character based, right? Let's do a comedy that's a workplace, but how do we change it up and make that more what's the Harrison Ford one? I'm blanking on its name, but like that's Shrinking. Yeah, so that's Shrinking. That's a workplace comedy, but it's much more character based, right? So that's kind of where I think it's going to, like the tried and true, what we would consider broadcast kind of genres of the workplace, the family comedy, the procedural, you know, the soaps, family, like the drama part, family dramas and that kind of stuff, kind of fitting all that in the same mold, but making it not that, not broadcast.
I just glanced at the article. I think it came out a few days ago, or I don't know, like, but there was an article that came out recently and it was like kind of, they were basically like execs, it was some exec that was maybe quoted by someone else, you know, third hand, but they were basically like, we understand that, you know, people put on Netflix and then they look at their phone. So the whatever is playing needs to be kind of playable in that sense. I forget, there was a good term for it, like second screen or something like that.
Yeah.
The main screen is phone, and what plays in, you know, the content, unless it's like, you know, the show that everybody's watching,
Right.
the content is kind of music, it's background.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
I mean, so I, you know, and I think, you know, the article was put, you know, like kind of saying this, you know, in the AI space and like kind of in a derogatory way. But I've thought about that a lot, because that's the reality, AI or not. Like, you know, with streaming, you put it on, most of the stuff you can put on, and then you kind of do some other stuff.
Yeah.
And my, you know, concept is kind of wants to lean into that. But have you heard of any, like, you know, execs in, you know, in regards to pitching who are kind of maybe interested in that? Because it seems like, you know, you still need to sort of, at least streaming now, it's like nobody's really leaned into that idea of like background watching, and how do you, you know, kind of make something interesting out of that?
Yeah. I that's an interesting question. I've not read that article, but I think knowing execs, like, no one wants to champion, you know, the fireplace show. I don't know. Like, I feel like as an exec, you want to, your goal is to create a show that someone does put their phone down and watch, right? Like, you don't want to be the exec that's like, yeah, I make fireplace shows.
I mean, but maybe,
Yeah.
you know, it's like maybe.
So pitching it in that way, I don't know, is helpful, right? I think the idea is, and this is going to be interesting too, because post-strike, a lot of these streamers are going to go ad-based, right? So they don't necessarily want you to be like just keeping the fireplace on, because now there are ads involved. And also, like, there's going to be, I feel, definitely more product integration. I think, like, what's interesting is, as this lingers longer, broadcast is going to die quicker, if not just its demise on return, right? And I think that ad buyers are going to need to, I think a lot of this is all driven by ad buyers. The fact that, like, broadcast still exists in its form is because these old men that still work in that sector of the business are still, they can't wrap their head around, you know, streamer numbers, or, you know, number of viewers online. And so, like, they still have this presence. And so I think on its demise, it's going to change, right? There's a lot of places that tried. I think this is going to be more of the time, is like having integration or sponsored content in a way that it, like the 1950s, if you will, right? Like, sponsored by Nike, and it's some like aspirational sports show, like Nike for Ted Lasso, you know, like, or Adidas for Ted Lasso. Like, that is, I think, the world that we're heading towards, which means, again, it becomes broad, right? You want to hit the biggest audience, but you also want to be smart and aspirational about it. So I think we'll see. I think it all kind of converges into that a little bit. And, you know, I think ad-based streaming, and then the fast channels, and then, you know, bundling, and if ESPN goes away, and like vertical integration it continues to be allowed, you have an NFL channel, and then you just have like an NBA channel, and, you know, those franchises just, or not the franchise, but those places just kind of just keep their money and distribute it to their franchisees in the way they see fit. And it becomes a very, very different world. But also then, like, the NFL can be like, you know what, we can create a studio and make scripted content every once in a while and have more control. That's always been the problem with people who write like professional sports stories, is that, like, how do you get the sports federation or group or whatever to okay it?
Yeah, it seems like Barbie has kind of broken this open.
Yeah, and, you know, Mattel did it on their own, and Mattel was has been always very protective of their IP. And the fact that they, even took this, even allowed this to happen, it's paying dividends for them, but like, it wasn't something that the brand managers wanted to happen ever.
Martin, we did get a question from Patricia who asked, would you recommend trying to get a project in front of a particular actor in hopes that they will be able to bring a producer to the table?
I think the idea of actors is, unless it's like this really amazing role that is Emmy bait, or actors of a certain age. For instance, we know that there are a lot of older female actors who, used to be movie stars, are now open to TV, and that gets been open for a while, but they're looking for that right piece. Attaching is always a very circular thing. I started in talent, and the agent that I work for said, I never attach my clients to anything. And the reason why is that if it doesn't sell, they take it upon themselves. They're like, it didn't sell because of me. Not because of the concept, the writer, it was me. I'm the one that failed. And so like, as an agent, you don't really want to like deal with that part of it. I had a situation where a client was friends with Dominic Cooper, and he sent him the script. He loved the character, wanted to do it. And it's like a Mad Men-esque thing. And he brought in his girlfriend, Gemma Chan, right? And obviously they're both repped at WME. And so then it became a 5th season thing, right? And it was kind of forced onto 5th season. And we took it out, and we were very excited because like, this is a period piece. It's going to, well, we were not excited about the period piece of it because that's very hard to sell. But you have these two actors that are of some value, right? Nobody bid, not one person. And I could see when we were putting this together how the agent that represented Gemma was not into this, because like she was like, she's gonna have to pick up the pieces when this gets passed on. And it also becomes a very long process. And that just, in that situation, it was just happen chance that the writer knew a person that was interested in this. And so, putting an actor together for a TV show is kind of like, for us, the last thing. It's easier to put on a director than it is to put on a piece of talent. For those reasons, like really the reason is like most agents don't want their talents to be attached and then get passed on. It's an ego thing they have to now deal with, I think, the aftermath.
Makes sense. I always like to hear about like the dark side of the industry, just so you learn from those mistakes and everything. What was the worst pitch that you've ever witnessed as an agent?
Oh my God. I think it goes back to the worst pitches are always kind of the veteran pitches for me. And I think the problem is veteran writers were represented at a certain time when agents didn't smell it, they just sold it because the marketplace was just so insane. And so when I give notes to some veteran writers, they just look at me and go, why do you even have notes? And why would I listen to your notes? Like, I've been doing this much longer than you have. And sometimes, for me, that's kind of the hardest part. That's like the most miserable part of my job is not, it's like, this is what we're hearing and you're refusing to do it. And like, you sit and it's like 40 minutes long. And I'm like, a pitch should not be 40 minutes long. And what happens is like they don't sell it, or they sell it to or they find a producer who's known them forever, puts themselves on it, and then they take it to the studio, and the only studio that wants it's the home studio, because that producer is such a big force that they're forced to make a deal. And then you go out and everyone's like, yeah, we don't want this. Or to like get notes from like one project had this issue, and we took it to Amblin, and literally they said, I love this concept, but the pitch wasn't there. Like, I don't need like this plot. I need to understand why. And it's very much, it's a like kind of a Faustian situation, but involved the whole family. And then eventually this town, we find out, it kind of unravels it. But she gets the story. Like, it's a very digestible story. Like, a family in a town are part of this town who's kind of been kind of imprisoned by this Faustian deal that they've all individually made, and not knowing that they've made it, right? That's a great pitch, right? That's a great concept. But she was like, but why? And what is but they couldn't get there because they're so stuck with having to tell the plot of the story, instead of like, how, like, why is this story being told? How does it relate to society now, right? And so that's where, for me, the hardest part of my job is this disconnect of storytelling, right? Because a lot of stories now, execs want a reason. There needs to be a reason that this like happens, and not just a good story. And yeah, we see a lot of like poorly executed TV shows out there, but they all come from, you know, there's a reason for this story. It just happens that when it was executed, it just is very plotty and not good. And that's it. There's multitude of reasons for that.
Any other questions, folks? Yeah.
I'm curious, Martin, thank you so much for sharing these great answers to our questions. Really appreciate it. I was curious also, you know, one thing that wasn't really covered is what was your path that led you to where you are today, you know, and maybe, yeah, just curious.
Yeah.
You got from point A to point B.
Yeah, I went to law school, and I thought I would do entertainment law. The nitty gritty is that I started in the mailroom, and I said this, I'm in law school, I kind of want to do entertainment law. So they put me in business affairs for a few weeks, or probably a week, and it felt like a few weeks. But when you're an intern, you're walking around with the mailroomers, and you get a sense of that energy. And then they put you in business affairs, which was like in another side of the building that can't be it's not accessible by the main elevator. So you're just like, oh, okay. And then you walk in, and everyone has these old desks, and all their files are in banker boxes. And you're just like, oh, like this is not the world I want to be in. And then, you know, the second half of the summer, I actually worked at biotech in-house, and I realized, oh, what I'm doing now is what they're doing, just in a different context. It's just contract administration. And so that's not very exciting. Like, there are bigger deals and like big package negotiations that happen at a high level. But again, there are no packages now, but that was reserved for kind of like the head of business affairs. And so I really, once I got out of it, I'm like, this is what after my first year, and I said, this is what I need to do. And so I started in talent, actually, and that's how I figured out, you know, got that bit of information of like attaching talent is very, very difficult unless managers are coming to you. Their managers will say, oh, you know, this actor is looking for something, right? I think a while, you know, things like Kevin Hart was looking for a buddy vehicle, and this is on the feature side. Like, sometimes that does happen. And then After that, I was in film financing again, went through that. It's not for me. And so I went to TV Lit, which was where I wanted to start, but sometimes you don't get what you want at a big agency. So I was there and got promoted there, became a manager, and kind of like, figured out how to actually give notes. I think that was something that I didn't learn as an agent, because again, agents were just used to like calling the manager like 10 minutes before the call and saying, what do you think? And then, they kind of do it together. So I got past that and learned how to, really read and dive in more than the agents that I worked with did. And then went to Paradigm, and, I think TV, just like it, even as it's falling apart, still makes the most sense to me. I understand the storytelling, I understand the business part of it, even though it's going to change. But storytelling isn't going to change. I think that is going to be a constant. It's just how big is the marketplace going to be, right? So that's just kind of where I am right now. And the reason why I even start looking at Asian IP was because of COVID. Like, outside of that, I'd just be a traditional lit agent, and COVID kind of opened me up to like figuring out different avenues in terms of making TV. And hopefully, my goal is to have a sell co-production. That is really my goal, because I think that's going to be a lot of streamers' goals as well, because as we can see now, like Korean shows, people are just watching on Netflix, and so Netflix is relying on that a little bit. Like the British shows, Australian shows that they acquire, they're relying on that to kind of help plug the gap as the strike is happening. So while their economy, their entertainment economy is very different, much lower, it's still something that's interesting and to take a look at. And some places are looking for American writers who can but it's like really creating this idea of like a fish out of water, essentially, usually is the case as an American in their world. But it's like finding that right idea, that concept that like feels organic and interesting. So that's where I'm kind of focusing right now during the strike. But yeah, and then I think I left out kind of the strategy of going out to a pitch. Usually with younger writers, we tend to like want to just go to a producer to kind of like shore up, like there's going to be someone that's going to be responsible, that can help. And like I said before, I think spec scripts are going to be more vital as we come out of the strike. And then the producers will then, hopefully, we'll see how it all shakes out, right? Because we're all hearing that these deals are going to go away, they're going to be force majeure, and like these studios are not going to. And so in my mind, I like the idea of more producers that can go anywhere. It just makes our jobs a lot easier, instead of like trying to like separate all the pods and then you can go here and you can go here and you can go there. They don't love it, because a lot of pods are also first looks. They don't love it, but like we got to protect ourselves, So if that goes away, it's just, you pick a producer that makes sense, and then you go to the studios, and then you pitch all the studios. And sometimes you skip the studios, because again, with streaming now, everyone is vertical anyway. So why don't you just go to the seller, and then the seller will back it up to their studio. So it just all depends on like the elements and kind of like how we think it plays out. Because sometimes you may have an idea and there's an exec at the studio that would like champion it to the end of time, right? So let's do the studio route, instead of like taking it up and then get it pushed down, because then like now the studio exec that's on it, it's not their project, right? So they care a little bit less about it. So it's like what we do is we kind of strategize about that and figure out like which is the best way to go. And again, in those conversations, usually sometimes with producers, because they have better access, it's like, who do they want to attach as their director? Do they want to package it up? Sometimes it's no, because sometimes you don't want to go with a director that may not be loved by this platform, right? Then you take yourself out of the running. And so like, that's a conversation to be had as well. Like, you know, let's take Greta Gerwig, for instance. Like, she's hot because Barbie is like made millions and millions of dollars. So you probably have a better chance at Greta Gerwig at this point. But Greta Gerwig, like before Barbie, there were probably people like, yeah, I don't really want to take a chance on her, kind of thing, right? So it all depends. And it's the same for talent. I think talent usually takes longer, like I said before, because there's so many layers. Talents have managers and they have agents, and usually if you're going to a talent of value, they're a big agency, and then it's like navigating that part of it is horrific. And even like, you know, we have situations where a writer has a director attached at CAA, and there's they want an actor, and then it's just like the agent can't even get the actor's rep to read it. Like, so like there's situations like that where it's just like, what the, like I had a client who they wrote a movie with a friend who's repped at CAA, and they wanted Sandra Bullock's rep to take a look at it. But it's a small role for her. It's like they wanted to reboot Miss Congeniality, but do kind of a gender swap. So it's a well, not gender, it's like this whole swap. It's a gay man with toxic masculinity in the FBI, and then he's put on he has to go onto a drag show, and you know, and he learns to, you know, to detox his masculinity, if you will. I guess that's a way to put it. But it's just like that, like wanting to continue that kind of legacy, and having her being kind of like just playing the head of the FBI or whatever. Literally, the CAA agent could not get Sandra Bullock's agent to read. And Village Roadshow was attached. Village Roadshow was the original producer. Like, that's how difficult getting a piece of talent to take a look at something can be, even with these elements put together. So we try to avoid it if we can. In this situation, it was like, she's the cherry on top, right? Like, she's the one that can get the right actors and whatever involved, or even get Warner Brothers involved, because Warner Brothers is the studio, and they're kind of like, do we want to reboot the franchise in this way? But if Sandra is into it, then it becomes a very, very different thing. So there's so many permutations, and like, what you want is, you know, to hear passion from your reps, that like, I'm going to try as hard to get through all these people and figure out some way to put it together, because there's no one right way. Like, we can have all producers pass across the board, and we can say, you know what, I still believe in this idea. Let's take it to a studio and see what they think. The only like crazy nuance to that with people with deals is that a lot of time now they bring it up to the studio to make sure. And so you're kind of like, they've shot the shot for you. But our job is to try to overcome that, because it's like, well, you haven't read the pilot, you just heard a pitch. Like, execution is everything. So that's kind of like simple but also complicated version of how it works on the TV side.
Martin, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. I know
Thank
it's
you,
a small
Martin.
group, but it was incredibly interactive and engaging. So thank you so much.
Yeah.
And
Are you open to follow-ups, Martin?
Yeah, definitely. Like, send me emails, let me know if you have any question. It's, you know, like I said, it's difficult, but like, you know, that's what our job is like, get through all the madness.
would you be open to sharing your email in the chat or saying it out loud so folks can
Yeah.
And thank you again, everybody, for your participation. This was great.
No, thank you for all the great questions. I mean, obviously that helps a lot because it really helps focus on, the holes of knowledge that you guys may have.
All right. Well,
Thanks.
enjoy the rest of your day, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your morning, Martin.
Yes,
and,
thank you.
Take care, folks.
All right. Nice
Bye.
to meet you, everyone. Bye.